Guys, how's it going? Welcome to my video. All right, just want to give you guys an update on what on my car. A couple days ago, I took a trip to the airport, dropping somebody off, and ended up in this restaurant area. Parked my car, went and got something to eat, probably in there for maybe 30 minutes, came back out, and was all set to go back home, and I couldn't get my car to turn over. It would crank, but it wouldn't start. So I must have tried cranking it up at least 5-6 times before I just gave up on it and realized that there was an issue that I would have to resolve first. So first couple of times, you know, it would just crank and crank and crank and crank. But so basically, I was thinking it might be the battery. It might have been the battery. It might have been the battery. So I was like, okay, let me turn on my headlights. Went out, checked it out. It was pretty bright. And that was my test for the battery. So normally when it's that bright, and it was very bright, you would assume that if there was an issue, you'd probably get like some kind of a slow crank or something like that. But considering it's cranking up, that's the first thing that came up in my mind was maybe it's the battery. Something that would be simple to fix. But regardless, at that point, I was like, okay, open up the hood and pretty much, try to figure out, if there was anything in the battery area that looked kind of off. So I noticed the terminals were a bit dirty or corroded. There was some white bluish stuff on there. So I had a can of Coke on me that I was gonna drink, but instead, I was gonna. I took a can of Coke and I poured it on the terminals, and it fizzed up quite a bit, as you can imagine. I took some paper towels, obviously cleaned it up, popped it back in. Now the terminals were not loose. I mean, they were tight, but not super tight. So if I wiggled it, I could pop it out, and then. So anyway, I was able to wiggle them out, clean them, popped it back in. So there was no issues with it being loose that would cause the issue. So I tried to turn the car on again, and still got nothing. It cranked, but it wouldn't turn over. So at that point, I was like, okay, probably wasn't a battery issue, but I did have a power pack that I bought from Walmart a couple months ago. Actually, I got that as a gift a couple months ago. Anyway, 75% charged up. I didn't actually charge it up to 100% because for whatever reason, but I popped it on and tried to start it. It would crank, strong crank, no start. All right, at that point, took it off. I knew 100% it wasn't the battery that was the problem. I knew that 100% it wasn't the battery that was the problem at that point. But I could have guessed it without doing that. But I just wanted to make sure. All right. So at that point, I was like, okay, what's next? I looked at the ground wire, checked out the ground wire, and just to make sure that the ground wire was it wasn't super rusted. There wasn't any kind of corrosion on it. So the ground wire, if you guys don't know, is the wire that the negative of the terminal that connects to the frame of the car. And I traced that, checked it out. Didn't seem to be any issues with that. So at that point, I ruled out the battery. I ruled out the ground wire, and I was able to rule out the alternator, but the alternator would not have been one of the things that would have been the cause of this issue to begin with. If I was getting a slow crank and then I put the battery pack on and then it jumped up and it started up, and then when I took the battery pack off, it turned itself off, turned off, died out. I would have known that was the alternator that was the problem. Okay, so at that point I could rule out all those things. Now, and now I will say that I did have a check engine light on the dash. So it's possible, but I've had that check engine light on the dash for quite a while. We're talking about a good 6 months. I wasn't able to clear it, and that check engine light was because of an O2 sensor. Now I don't know if there's another code that popped up. Didn't know if there was another code that popped up at the time, but what I did was, I know that there's a bunch of things that could cause this issue, and that has a sensor on it that an OBD2 reader can pick up. They could be the mass airflow sensor could cause a crank no start, the throttle position sensor, the crankshaft, the camshaft, and probably a host of other things. And if the car's computer isn't connected to the car itself for whatever reason, a blown fuse, a problem with the ECU, the car's computer. But okay, so I had a $19 OBD2 reader that I bought from Walmart. So just to test all that out, because it would, because you would want in that situation to eliminate as many things as possible. So I popped it in, and it scanned all the way through. At that point, when it scanned all the way through, I knew 100% that it probably wasn't the car's computer, because if it was the car's computer or ECU having an issue, it would probably have scanned halfway and then stopped. That's not what it did. All right, and then it would just hang there. It didn't do that. It went all the way through. So at that point, I knew it wasn't the car's computer. And then the readout was another thing that tipped me off that it wasn't anything to do with, the camshaft, the crankshaft, any of those things that have a sensor associated with it, because the only code that popped up was an OBD2 code. That was the only code that popped up. All right. So at that point, I could rule all those things out. All those things were ruled out at that point. So I was left with a couple of things that could cause it, where I would be able to resolve it fairly quickly without having to put in any kind of effort as far as changing up major mechanical parts, so I was like, okay, no, I knew the starter was working. Obviously it wasn't just the starter, because the starter was working, it was cranking strong, so that starter could be ruled out, all those things. And I was hoping that it wasn't the fuel pump, especially the fuel pump. I mean, it could have been the fuel pump or the fuel filter. Now, generally speaking, the test for that is, you would want to hear the fuel pump whizzing, the motor whizzing. So the test for that is, normally you would have somebody have their ear to the gas tank. All right, not to the gas tank, but to the gas cap area with the gas cap off. And then have somebody, try to turn the car to the on position. The on position is the position before the car turns over. You don't want to crank it, because once you crank it, turn to the crank position, it, the sounds, kind of the cranking, and if there was a sound coming from the fuel pump, you would it would drown that out. So basically, I didn't have anybody else with me at the time. So I was sitting in the car with everything off. All right, blower motor was off, everything was off, and I turned it to the on position, and was sitting in the car trying to listen for some kind of whizzing sounds, for some kind of sound that might, that I might have been able to to make out. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to make out any sounds at all. You know, whether it was whizzing or not, I wasn't able to make a distinction. So just to be sure, the next step I did was I actually got to the fuse box with the relays and everything, and I checked out all the fuses. And none of the fuses looked like they were blown at all. They didn't look like they were blown. There wasn't any kind of brownish tint to the top of the fuses. They didn't smell like they were burned. So I was able to, no, not at 100%, but I was able to discern that it wasn't the fuses. Now it would have been it would have been great if I had a fuse tester with me, but I didn't. So the next thing that I looked at was the relays, specifically the fuel pump relay. So I looked at the fuel pump relay and couldn't make out whether it was blown or not, but there was another relay that was the same or similar. So what I did was I swapped it out. All right, I swapped it out and got back in my car, tried to turn it on, was hoping that would have fixed it, and guess what, guys? It fixed it. It cranked up, no problems whatsoever. And at that point I realized that it was the fuel pump relay that was the problem. So long story short, I was able to drive it to an AutoZone, got the relay for it, and then popped it in. Popped out the bad relay for the good one, and at least one of them. And everything has been working fine since. No issues whatsoever. I am so glad that it wasn't the fuel pump, because that would have been a major. That would have been more work, more money. So if you guys are in this situation, you guys are going through this crank no start situation, just go down the list of what I went through. Okay, you guys should be able to figure out what that problem is. Now there's other things that you could look at as far as what could be causing it. Ignition, a bad ignition cylinder could be causing something like that. A bad fob key could be causing something like that. If you guys are in that situation and you guys went through everything and everything seems to be working, those are the two things that I did not test, because I did change I did change the key on the fob a couple months ago, so I didn't think that was the issue. The ignition cylinder would have been something that would I don't know. I don't know about that. It probably would have been something that occurred multiple times, sporadically or something like that. That could be the issue, but it wasn't the issue here. I hope you guys figure out your problem, because you guys are watching this video. Obviously, you guys are probably in the same guys are probably in the same situation. So anyway, if you guys have any comments, please leave a comment in the comment section. Please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe. All right, guys, take care.